A chance encounter. On a brisk afternoon, the vibrant pulse of New York City flowed through the streets, blending a cacophony of sounds and scents. Among the throngs of people, Damon Russell strolled through a local grocery store, the familiar strap of his grocery bag resting comfortably on his shoulder. It was a rare day off for Damon, a police captain, allowing him a brief respite from the often chaotic world of law enforcement. He relished the anonymity of shopping without a uniform, blending seamlessly into the sea of shoppers. As he meandered through the aisles, he caught sight of a commotion brewing near the locked glass display of toiletries. A man, visibly agitated, tapped his foot impatiently, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. Damon slowed his pace, curiosity piqued as he drew closer to the unfolding scene. "Unbelievable," the man muttered, his tone saturated with frustration. "I have to wait here for someone to open this because of them." Damon's brow furrowed as he recognized the man's words, the bitterness dripping from his voice. The store clerk, a young woman in her 20s, fumbled with her keys, her hand shaking slightly as she attempted to unlock the display without making eye contact. The man's words grew louder, a venomous tirade aimed at the clerk. "Ridiculous. It's because of those people," he spat, gesturing vaguely toward the customers milling about. The young woman's discomfort was palpable. She managed a tight-lipped smile, handing the man his item as he continued his rant. Damon's heart began to race, an all-too-familiar heat rising in his chest. He was off duty, but that didn't matter. He couldn't just stand by while this man, Chad Walters, spewed his racist vitriol. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer, his voice calm yet firm. "Why don't you explain that again for all of us to hear?" Chad turned, startled by the interruption. He sized Damon up, a sneer forming on his lips. "Oh, you got something to say?" he challenged, as if Damon was just another nobody trying to play the hero. "Yeah, I do," Damon replied, maintaining eye contact. "What gives you the right to talk to people like that, blaming her for your problems?" Chad's smirk deepened, emboldened by the small crowd that had gathered to witness the confrontation. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't like hearing the truth." Damon felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, but he kept his voice steady. "You don't know the first thing about truth." He gestured toward the clerk, who had retreated slightly, visibly shaken. "You're standing here complaining about waiting a few minutes for a clerk to unlock a cabinet, and that's our fault." Chad scoffed, dismissing Damon's words as he looked to the onlookers. "It's more than that. I'm sick of the way this city caters to people who don't look like you," Damon interjected, his voice cutting through the tension. Chad's arrogance faltered momentarily, but he quickly rallied. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I shouldn't have to suffer because others can't follow the rules." Damon took a step closer, narrowing the distance between them. "Suffer? That's what you call waiting an extra minute for someone to unlock a case?" Chad's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. The tension in the air thickened, and Damon could sense the rage bubbling beneath the surface. "You think your life's hard because of people like me?" Damon challenged, his voice calm yet authoritative. Chad's arrogance fed on the growing audience, emboldening him. "You people are all the same, always quick to play the victim. Always someone else's fault." Damon crossed his arms, maintaining his unyielding gaze. "Go ahead, say it. I'm sure you've got plenty more you're dying to get off your chest." Chad seized the moment, his voice rising as he fed off the attention. "You know what the problem is. We're bending over backward for people who don't deserve it. And people like you expect everything to be handed to you." Damon's fists clenched at his sides, but he remained impassive. "What you're really saying is that you feel entitled to respect, but don't know how to give it." The crowd, captivated by the exchange, held its collective breath. The clerk stood frozen, desperately wanting to disappear as the confrontation escalated. "You're sick of having to deal with this every day. Try being judged the moment you walk into a room. Try hearing ignorant comments like yours and being expected to just let it slide." Damon's words sliced through the air, resonating with those who understood the weight of prejudice. Chad scoffed, shaking his head as if dismissing Damon's experiences. "Here we go, playing the race card right on schedule." "This isn't about a card or a game," Damon said, his tone steady yet powerful. "This is about respect. The respect you think you're entitled to but can't extend to others." Chad's face flushed crimson as his hand tightened into a fist. For a fleeting moment, Damon saw the spark of violent intent flash across Chad's features. The tension hung thick in the air, a palpable weight as their eyes locked. Damon stood his ground, daring Chad to make a move. But instead, Chad hesitated, glancing at the audience, clearly aware that a physical confrontation would only escalate the situation. "You'll regret this," Chad spat, his words laced with venom, before turning sharply on his heel and storming toward the exit. Damon took a deep breath, the tension easing in his chest, but not without leaving a lingering anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He turned to the clerk, who stood wide-eyed and shaken. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. I didn't know what to say." "I'm sorry," she stammered. "You don't have to apologize for him," Damon reassured her, his tone softening. "Just take care of yourself." With that, he turned and headed toward the checkout, thinking the confrontation was behind him. As he stepped outside, the brisk air felt refreshing against his skin, a welcome change from the tense atmosphere inside. He thought he could let the incident fade into the background, but as he turned to head down the street, he felt a hard shove from behind. Consequences of confrontation. As the brisk air filled his lungs, Damon thought he could finally put the incident behind him. However, the adrenaline coursing through his veins told a different story. He began walking down the busy street, his mind racing as he replayed the confrontation with Chad over and over again. Every word, every sneer, every moment of tension echoed in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. Just as he rounded the corner, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. He turned to see Chad barreling toward him, his face a mask of rage and embarrassment. "You think you can just walk away from me? You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone and just leave?" Chad shouted, his voice rising above the bustling street noise. Damon squared his shoulders, ready to defuse the situation. "Walk away, man. It's over," he said, trying to keep his tone calm. He had learned long ago that escalating a confrontation rarely led to resolution. But Chad, fueled by anger and humiliation, didn't back down. "Oh no, it's not over. You embarrassed me. I'm not going to let you get away with that." His eyes darted around, seeking validation from the small crowd that had gathered again, their phones poised to record the drama unfolding before them. Damon sighed, feeling the tension creeping back into his chest. "I'm not looking for trouble," he repeated, but his voice was firmer this time, a warning that he hoped Chad would heed. "If you push it, you're going to find it." Chad stepped closer, his finger jabbing into Damon's chest with each word. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it?" He sneered, his bravado now a mask for his underlying fear. Damon's patience thinned, but he chose his words carefully. "Get your hands off me." The command was simple yet packed with authority. The crowd held its breath, anticipating a flashpoint as Chad's rage simmered just below the surface. In that tense moment, the air between them crackled with the potential for violence. Damon felt his instincts kick in. He was trained for this, to read the signs, to anticipate the next move. But Chad's fury had clouded his judgment, and he was all too ready to explode. "Is that a threat?" Chad demanded, his eyes narrowing, challenging Damon to take it further. "Let's not make it one," Damon replied, his voice steady as he tried to maintain a semblance of control over the spiraling situation. But the crowd was hungry for confrontation, and Chad was feeding off their energy. In a swift, unexpected movement, Chad shoved Damon hard. Damon stumbled back, catching himself just in time. He felt a surge of anger but remained composed, knowing that any escalation could turn disastrous. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment for posterity. "Oh, that's it." Chad yelled, feigning injury as he clutched his chest dramatically, like a bad actor in a low-budget film. "You're going to pay for this." Damon didn't flinch. He had dealt with far worse in his line of work. "Is this really how you want to handle it?" he asked, his voice calm yet firm, trying to de-escalate. "Because if you keep this up, it's going to end badly for you." Chad's bravado wavered for a moment as he glanced around at the gathering crowd, but the need to assert his dominance pushed him to stand his ground. "You think you can just bully people because you wear a badge?" he spat, pointing an accusatory finger at Damon. "Actually, I don't need my badge to see that you're in the wrong," Damon shot back. "You're acting like a child throwing a tantrum because you didn't get your way." Chad's face reddened, and for a moment, it looked like he would charge at Damon. But just as quickly, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. Perhaps he realized that the audience was witnessing not just a confrontation, but a testament to the strength of character Damon was displaying. The cameras were rolling, and he was aware that an impulsive move might turn the tide against him. "You'll regret this," Chad finally spat before turning on his heel and storming away, leaving behind a buzz of murmurs from the crowd. Damon watched him go, his heart still racing as he took a moment to gather himself. He felt a strange mix of relief and lingering anger, knowing that this wasn't over yet. As the crowd began to disperse, Damon felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see an older man, a witness to the altercation, standing beside him. "You handled that well, son," the man said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "People like that don't know how to lose gracefully." "Thanks," Damon replied, still catching his breath. "But I wish it didn't have to come to that." "People like Chad are everywhere," the man replied, shaking his head. "They thrive on conflict. You did the right thing by standing up to him. Not everyone would have." Damon nodded, appreciating the man's words. "I just wish more people would understand that respect goes both ways." "Some never will," the man said, his gaze distant. "Just keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference, even if it feels small." As the man walked away, Damon felt a flicker of hope. He was committed to fostering respect and understanding in his community, and though he faced challenges, he wouldn't back down. He made his way back home, reflecting on the confrontation. Later that evening, as Damon prepared dinner, he couldn't shake the events of the day from his mind. The incident had awakened a familiar feeling, the desire to address the societal issues that so often went unchallenged. It was a calling that drove him to join the police force in the first place, a commitment to serve and protect, to build bridges instead of walls. As he stirred the pot on the stove, his phone buzzed on the counter. A message from one of his colleagues lit up the screen. "Did you see the video? It's going viral. Everyone's talking about the confrontation at the store." Damon's heart sank. He didn't want to be a spectacle. He wanted to be a solution. He opened the video and watched as the confrontation played out, his voice echoing in the background. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Chad shouted. The video captured every tense moment, every taunt, and every moment of Damon standing his ground. He scrolled through the comments, his heart racing. Mixed reactions flooded the feed, some praising his calm demeanor, while others labeled him an instigator. The comment section turned into a battleground of opinions, illustrating the deep divides in society. One comment caught his eye. "Why didn't he just walk away? He's making things worse." Damon shook his head. Walking away had been an option, but silence was complicity. He believed in addressing the issues head-on, even if it meant facing backlash. He set his phone down, feeling the weight of the day settle on his shoulders. He had chosen to stand up for what was right, but now he faced potential consequences for his actions. It was a delicate balance, and he felt the pressure mounting. The next morning, as Damon reported to the precinct, he was met with an unexpected atmosphere. Whispers filled the air. Eyes followed him as he walked through the halls. It felt as if he were a ghost, lingering between the living and the stories circulating around him. "Hey, Captain," one of his colleagues called, a hint of camaraderie in his tone. "You're the talk of the department." "Yeah, I noticed," Damon replied, trying to keep his composure. "Listen, I think you did the right thing. Chad had it coming, and the way you handled it. That's what we need more of around here," his colleague added, patting him on the back. Damon appreciated the support, but felt the weight of responsibility settle in. The video had gone viral for a reason. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the larger narrative of race, respect, and the ongoing battle against ignorance. As he entered his office, he found his commanding officer waiting for him, arms crossed. "Russell, we need to talk," the captain said, his voice serious. Damon took a seat, bracing himself. "I assume you've seen the video." "I have. And while I appreciate your intentions, this isn't just about you and Chad anymore. It's about the department and how we're perceived." "I understand," Damon replied, feeling a pang of frustration. "But I can't just stand by when I see injustice. If we don't address it, who will?" His captain sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You have to remember, Damon, not everyone will see it that way. You put yourself, and the department, at risk by engaging like that. We need to maintain professionalism." Damon nodded, absorbing the advice, but he felt his resolve harden. "I'm not going to shy away from standing up for what's right, sir. If we don't challenge the status quo, how can we expect to see change?" His captain regarded him for a moment, and Damon could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Just be cautious. The backlash might come from unexpected places. The department will support you, but you need to navigate this carefully." With a firm nod, Damon left the office, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. As the day unfolded, Damon reflected on the responsibilities that came with his position. He had a platform, a voice that could influence change. His commitment to fostering understanding and respect became clearer. He needed to use his experiences to educate, to create dialogues rather than confrontations. But as he stepped into the precinct, he couldn't shake the feeling that Chad was far from finished. He could almost sense the storm brewing in the distance, an impending clash between ideals and reality. The confrontation was only the beginning, and Damon was prepared to see it through. The reckoning. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a whirlwind for Damon Russell. The video of his altercation with Chad Walters had gone viral, igniting a mix of outrage and support across social media platforms. News outlets picked up the story, and it became a hot topic in community discussions, leading to town hall meetings and debates that highlighted the ongoing issues of race relations in New York City. Damon felt a peculiar weight on his shoulders. While he was proud of standing up against racism, he hadn't anticipated the ripple effect of his actions. He was no longer just a police captain. He had become a symbol of resistance for some and a target for others. Each morning brought fresh headlines, opinions, and heated discussions that echoed in his mind. On a particularly chilly Tuesday morning, Damon arrived at the precinct ready to face another day. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone was talking about him, some in admiration and others in disdain. He braced himself for the day ahead, knowing that he would have to navigate a complex web of opinions and expectations. As he walked through the precinct, he could feel the eyes on him. Some colleagues greeted him with nods of solidarity, while others averted their gaze, as if they were unsure how to react. It was a stark reminder that not everyone viewed the world through the same lens. "Hey, Captain," one of his fellow officers called out. "You ready for this town hall meeting later? It's going to be packed." "Yeah, I heard," Damon replied, trying to keep his tone casual, though he felt the knot tightening in his stomach. He knew the meeting would be a battleground for opinions, and he was prepared to defend his stance while advocating for respect and understanding in the community. Later that evening, as Damon sat in the crowded community center, he felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The room buzzed with anticipation as residents gathered to discuss the recent incident and its implications. City officials, community leaders, and concerned citizens filled the seats, their voices blending into a low hum of chatter. Damon took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversations ahead. The room eventually quieted down, and the moderator, a well-respected local journalist, began the meeting. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we'll discuss the events surrounding the confrontation between Captain Damon Russell and Chad Walters, and what it means for our community moving forward. The moderator introduced Damon, and he stood up, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Thank you for having me, he began, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. I appreciate everyone's interest in this issue. It's crucial that we talk about these matters openly. As he spoke, Damon recounted the events that had unfolded in the grocery store, emphasizing the importance of addressing racism directly. He spoke passionately about the impact of stereotypes and how they could poison relationships within the community. He urged everyone to reflect on their own biases and strive for understanding. But as he looked out into the audience, he saw a range of reactions. Some were nodding in agreement, while others scowled, clearly unimpressed by his message. When he opened the floor to questions, the tension in the room became palpable. Captain Russell, a woman stood up, her voice rising above the crowd. What you did was instigating. You shouldn't have confronted Chad like that. You're a police officer. You should know better. Damon felt a flicker of frustration, but reminded himself to remain composed. I understand your concern, ma'am, but my job is not just to enforce the law. It's also to protect my community and foster respect among its members. Ignoring hateful speech only allows it to fester. Another voice chimed in from the back. But you could have just walked away. By engaging with him, you made it worse. Damon nodded, acknowledging the point. I see your perspective, and I understand that walking away is often the easiest choice. But if we continue to walk away from uncomfortable conversations, we allow those harmful views to remain unchallenged. It's crucial to stand up for what's right, even if it's uncomfortable. The room erupted into a flurry of conversations. Supporters defended him, while others continued to criticize his actions. The dialogue turned into a passionate debate, with individuals sharing personal experiences that illuminated the complexity of race relations in the city. I have a son who looks just like you. An older man shouted, gesturing toward Damon. He faced discrimination because of the color of his skin. You have to understand. It's not just words. It's our lives. Damon listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy. I do understand, he replied softly. And that's why we need to work together to address these issues. We all have stories, and if we share them, we can start to build bridges instead of walls. The meeting continued for hours, with emotions running high. By the end, Damon felt both exhausted and hopeful. Although they hadn't reached a consensus, the conversations had opened the door to understanding, and that was a step in the right direction. As the crowd dispersed, Damon lingered, speaking with a few community members who wanted to continue the discussion. Thank you for what you're doing, a woman said, her voice tinged with sincerity. It takes courage to speak up. Thank you for being here, Damon replied. We all have to be a part of the solution. The following days were a blur as the media continued to cover the fallout from the incident. Damon found himself juggling his responsibilities as a captain while navigating the pressures of being in the public eye. He felt a newfound sense of duty to his community, a calling to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the people they served. But not everyone was supportive. Chad Walters, emboldened by the attention, began to mobilize his own supporters. He took to social media, painting himself as a victim of police brutality and portraying Damon as an out-of-control officer. The rhetoric quickly escalated, with Chad rallying those who shared his views, turning the incident into a rallying cry for those who felt disenfranchised. Damon could see the tide turning in the community. He felt the weight of the public's expectations and the scrutiny of his superiors. It was a battle he hadn't anticipated, but he refused to back down. He reached out to community organizations, scheduling meetings to foster dialogue and understanding. One afternoon, As Damon was reviewing his notes for an upcoming community workshop, his phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, and his heart sank. A video had surfaced online, showing Chad surrounded by a small group of supporters. They were shouting slogans against Damon and the police department, calling for a boycott of local businesses that supported the police. "Here we go again," Damon muttered under his breath, feeling the anger bubbling within him. He knew that Chad's tactics were only going to escalate tensions further, but he couldn't allow that to deter his mission. Determined, Damon called a meeting with his team at the precinct. He gathered his officers, sharing his concerns and discussing strategies for community engagement. "We can't allow a few loud voices to dictate the narrative," he stated firmly. "We need to show our community that we're here to protect and serve, and that means actively listening to their concerns." His team nodded, and together they brainstormed ideas for outreach initiatives. They decided to host a series of open forums, allowing community members to voice their concerns and share their experiences with law enforcement. It was a chance to foster transparency and rebuild trust. As the date for the first forum approached, Damon felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Would the community respond positively? Would Chad and his supporters attempt to disrupt the event? The day of the forum arrived, and the community center was filled with a diverse crowd of residents, eager to share their thoughts. Damon took a deep breath as he stood at the front of the room, looking out at the sea of faces. He welcomed everyone warmly, reminding them that this was a safe space for open dialogue. As the evening unfolded, participants shared powerful stories of discrimination, fear, and resilience. Damon listened intently, asking questions, validating their experiences. The room was filled with a sense of connection, and Damon could feel walls beginning to crumble. Suddenly, a familiar face entered the room, Chad Walters. He stood at the back, arms crossed, a scowl on his face. Damon felt a surge of tension, unsure of how Chad would respond to the ongoing conversations. Chad's arrival shifted the atmosphere slightly, but Damon remained focused. He continued to encourage others to speak, emphasizing the importance of unity and understanding. As the evening progressed, more people began to speak out against Chad's divisive rhetoric, offering their own stories of hope and healing. "Chad, if you have something to say, feel free to join us," Damon called out, inviting him to engage rather than retreat. The room turned to face him, a collective breath held in anticipation. Chad hesitated, but the weight of the moment forced him to take a step forward. "I just want to say that not everyone who feels this way is a bad person. We're tired of being looked down upon. You don't understand what it's like." Damon nodded, acknowledging Chad's frustration. "I hear you, and I understand that there are feelings of anger and resentment. But this isn't just about one person. It's about the systemic issues that affect all of us. We need to find common ground to address the root causes of these feelings." The tension in the room shifted as people began to share their thoughts with Chad. Rather than lash out, they invited him into the conversation, creating a space for understanding. As the night wore on, Damon saw the power of dialogue in action. Chad, initially defensive, began to listen to others' experiences and slowly opened up. It was a small victory, but one that felt significant. When the forum ended, Damon felt a renewed sense of hope. Though the journey ahead was fraught with challenges, he knew that fostering conversations was a crucial step toward building a stronger community. He had to believe that they could work through their differences and emerge more united than before. As he left the community center, Damon couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Chad was still a threat, and the road ahead would require courage and resilience. But for now, Damon felt a glimmer of optimism that perhaps together they could forge a better path. A divided community. In the weeks following the community forum, Damon Russell's life had taken on a new rhythm. The events surrounding his confrontation with Chad Walters and the subsequent public discussions had ignited a firestorm of opinions across the city. As Damon continued his efforts to foster dialogue and understanding, he found himself navigating a complex landscape of alliances, hostility, and hope. The media frenzy showed no signs of slowing down. News reports, opinion pieces, and social media posts continued to circulate, framing Damon as either a hero standing up against racism or an instigator stirring up trouble. Every time he opened his phone, he was greeted with a barrage of notifications, some praising his courage, while others vilified him as a threat to public safety. At the precinct, his colleagues had divided into factions. Some officers supported him wholeheartedly, believing that his actions were necessary to address systemic issues within the police department. Others, however, felt he had overstepped his boundaries, endangering the reputation of the entire force. This internal conflict created an atmosphere of tension that Damon could feel even in the air. One particularly chilly morning, as Damon prepared for another town hall meeting, he sat at his desk reviewing the notes. He had reached out to several community organizations, inviting them to participate in discussions on how the police could better serve and protect their neighborhoods. He believed that by including diverse voices, they could begin to heal the rift that had formed. As he finalized his notes, his phone rang. It was his partner, Officer Lena Patel, a steadfast ally who had stood by him throughout the turbulence. "Hey, Damon, can we talk before the meeting?" "Of course," Damon replied, grateful for the opportunity to share thoughts. They'd met in a quiet corner of the precinct, away from prying eyes and ears. "Look," Lena began, her brow furrowed with concern. "I know you're trying to do the right thing, but the backlash is getting out of control. Chad is rallying his supporters, and it feels like it's turning into a war." Damon nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I know, but we can't back down. If we do, it sends the message that we're okay with the status quo, and I refuse to accept that." "I get that, but we need to be strategic," Lena replied. "What if we organized a joint event, maybe a community BBQ or something? It could serve as a way to bring people together in a non-confrontational environment." Damon considered the idea, recognizing its potential. That could work. It might allow people to connect on a personal level rather than through the lens of conflict. Lena smiled, her eyes brightening. "I can work on the logistics. Let's invite everyone, both sides of the argument. It could be a step toward bridging the gap." After their meeting, Damon felt a surge of optimism. Organizing the community event could provide a platform for genuine interaction, allowing people to see each other as individuals rather than stereotypes. He threw himself into the planning, reaching out to local businesses and organizations for support. As the day of the BBQ approached, excitement mixed with anxiety. Damon hoped it would be a success, but he was acutely aware that not everyone would be on board. Chad had been vocal about his opposition to Damon's initiatives, claiming they were simply attempts to divert attention from the real issues at hand. The day of the BBQ dawned bright and sunny, and the community center's courtyard was transformed into a vibrant gathering space. Colorful banners hung overhead, and the smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs wafted through the air. Damon arrived early to set up, his heart racing with anticipation. As people began to trickle in, he greeted them warmly, shaking hands and engaging in small talk. The atmosphere was lively, and laughter echoed around the courtyard. Families set up picnic blankets, children ran around playing tag, and community organizations set up booths with information and resources. But as the crowd grew, Damon noticed a palpable tension in the air. While many attendees were eager to engage, others remained on the fringes, crossing their arms and casting wary glances at one another. Damon's resolve was tested, but he was determined to make this event a turning point. "All right, everyone," Damon called out, climbing onto a small platform set up for announcements. "Thank you all for coming today. This is a celebration of our community, a chance for us to connect and share our stories." As he spoke, Damon's eyes scanned the crowd. He noticed Chad standing off to the side, flanked by a small group of supporters. Their expressions were a mix of skepticism and hostility, but Damon refused to let it deter him. "I know there are differences among us," Damon continued, his voice steady. but it's essential that we listen to each other, that we learn from one another. Together, we can work toward building a community that respects and uplifts everyone. He invited community leaders to share their thoughts, hoping to set a tone of cooperation. One by one, they took the microphone, speaking about their experiences and the importance of unity. The atmosphere shifted slightly as people began to engage in conversations, sharing laughs and ideas. But just as things seemed to be moving in the right direction, Chad stepped forward, taking the mic with a defiant smirk on his face. "Let's not pretend this is all sunshine and rainbows. You all know that Damon here wants to change everything because he thinks he knows better than us." The crowd fell silent, eyes darting between Chad and Damon. Chad's voice dripped with disdain, but Damon stood firm, refusing to be rattled. "What I want is for us to talk honestly about our issues," Damon replied, maintaining his composure. "This isn't about one person knowing better. It's about everyone having a voice." Chad shook his head, dismissing Damon's words. "You think you can just smile your way through this? People like you don't understand the real problems we face." "Then let's talk about it," Damon challenged. "What are the real problems? I'm here, and I want to listen." Chad hesitated, taken aback by Damon's willingness to engage. "You think you're doing us a favor by asking. You don't live in our neighborhoods. You don't know what it's like." Damon took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You're right. I don't live your experiences. But I want to understand. If we're going to move forward, we need to hear each other out." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement while others remained skeptical. Damon's heart raced as he fought to keep the momentum going. "This is our chance to change things. Let's not waste it on animosity." As the tension hung thick in the air, the crowd shifted. Some stepped forward, offering their own stories of frustration, pain, and hopes for a better future. Damon listened intently, validating their experiences and encouraging open dialogue. Slowly but surely, the mood began to shift. People started to engage with one another, sharing laughter and understanding amidst the complexities of their differing perspectives. The BBQ transformed into a genuine opportunity for connection, a space where barriers could be broken down. Yet as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the courtyard, Damon couldn't shake the feeling that Chad's presence loomed over the event like a shadow. Despite the positive interactions, he knew that the deeper issues within the community remained unresolved. As the event wound down, Damon caught sight of Chad standing at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He walked over, hoping for a moment of honesty amidst the chaos. "I appreciate you coming today," Damon said, offering a tentative olive branch. "I hope you found some value in it." Chad met his gaze, and for a brief moment, Damon saw a flicker of uncertainty. "I still don't agree with everything you're doing, but I guess talking is better than shouting," Chad admitted, his tone softer than before. Damon nodded, encouraged by the exchange. "That's a start. If you're willing, I'd like to keep this conversation going." Chad hesitated, but then nodded slightly. "Maybe. We'll see." As Chad walked away, Damon felt a sense of relief mixed with cautious optimism. Perhaps today had been a turning point, a moment where dialogue began to bridge the gap that had formed. It was only a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a victory nonetheless. With the BBQ coming to an end, Damon gathered his things, feeling grateful for the connections that had been made. He knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could move toward a brighter future together. Shifting currents. The community BBQ had been a surprising success, with conversations flowing more freely than Damon Russell had dared to hope. But the underlying tensions in the community were still very much alive. As the sun set on that vibrant day, casting long shadows over the courtyard, Damon knew that while bridges had been built, there were still many chasms to cross. In the days following the event, Damon found himself increasingly preoccupied. The positive interactions with community members had bolstered his resolve, but the reality of the ongoing divisions weighed heavily on his mind. He began spending late nights at the precinct, reviewing reports, analyzing patterns of crime in the areas he served, and drafting proposals for initiatives aimed at improving community relations. But even in the quiet confines of the precinct, he couldn't escape the growing rift. Word on the street was that Chad Walters had taken his campaign against Damon to the next level. His social media presence had exploded, and he was organizing rallies, gathering a coalition of supporters who felt equally disenfranchised. They were protesting what they viewed as an unjust treatment of their grievances, targeting not only Damon but the entire police department. One particularly tense afternoon, as Damon sat in his office poring over data from the previous month, Lena knocked and entered. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "What's going on?" Damon asked, leaning back in his chair, sensing the weight of her expression. "Chad's rally is this weekend, and it's getting bigger. He's promised to expose everything he claims is wrong with the department," Lena said, crossing her arms. "If we don't respond, it could turn into a real problem." Damon nodded, feeling the tension coil in his stomach. "I can't let this spiral out of control. What do you suggest?" Lena paused, her brow furrowing in thought. "We need to show a presence, but not as a confrontational force. Maybe we can set up a community outreach booth nearby, offer free resources, and open a dialogue. If we can show that we're here to listen, it might counter some of the negativity." Damon considered the idea, recognizing its potential. "That could work. We can't let Chad control the narrative. Let's get a team together to plan this." As the weekend approached, the precinct buzzed with preparations. Officers volunteered their time, eager to engage with the community in a positive way. They set up booths with pamphlets on community safety, local resources, and a space for residents to share their concerns. The day of the rally dawned gray and overcast, a stark contrast to the sunny BB hue. A sense of foreboding hung in the air as Damon and his team arrived at the park, where the rally was set to take place. Crowds were already gathering, many of them waving signs denouncing the police department and chanting slogans that echoed through the chilly air. Damon felt his heart rate quicken as he surveyed the scene. Chad was standing on a makeshift stage, passionately addressing the crowd, his words fueled by anger and frustration. "We won't be silenced. This department doesn't care about us," he shouted, his voice carrying over the crowd. Damon exchanged a glance with Lena, who stood beside him, her expression a mix of determination and concern. "Let's stick to the plan," she urged. "We're here to listen, not to confront." Taking a deep breath, Damon led their small contingent of officers toward their outreach booth, setting up just out of the direct line of Chad's speech. As they arranged their materials, the atmosphere around them felt electric, charged with emotion. Soon, people began to drift toward their booth, drawn in by the free resources and the promise of an open dialogue. Damon approached a group of residents, offering them pamphlets and introducing himself. "I'm Captain Damon Russell. We're here to listen to your concerns and provide resources that might help." At first, the reception was lukewarm. Some individuals took the pamphlets hesitantly, while others shot him skeptical looks. Damon could feel the weight of the animosity in the air, remnants of the fallout from his earlier confrontation with Chad. But as the minutes turned into an hour, a shift began to occur. A few individuals stepped forward, sharing their own experiences with law enforcement. Damon listened intently, nodding as they voiced their frustrations about the perceived lack of accountability within the department. "I've been pulled over for no reason more times than I can count," one man stated, his voice low but firm. "It's like they see my skin color and assume the worst." Damon felt the sting of his words, the truth cutting deep. "I'm sorry you've experienced that. It shouldn't be that way. We're working to change the culture within the department, and your feedback is essential." Another woman chimed in. "But it feels like you're just saying that. What are you really doing to make a difference?" Her question hung in the air, and Damon sensed the weight of their expectations. We're implementing community engagement programs and training for officers focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. But I understand that it takes more than just words. It requires action." As he spoke, he noticed Chad's voice rising from the stage, and the crowd's energy shifted again, their attention drawn back to him. "They're just trying to distract you," Chad shouted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Don't be fooled by their lies. The police are not your friends." Damon felt a pang of frustration at Chad's manipulation of the crowd. He knew that not everyone would be swayed by his sincerity, but he refused to back down. He had to continue fostering connections, no matter how difficult it became. "Let's keep talking," Damon urged the group around the booth. "Your voices matter, and together we can push for the changes we all want to see." As the rally continued, the tension in the park grew. Chad's rhetoric intensified, encouraging his supporters to drown out any positive message coming from the police department. "This is our moment. We have to stand up against a system that oppresses us," he shouted, rallying his followers. Damon glanced around, noticing that some of his officers were beginning to look uneasy. He stepped away from the booth, approaching his team. "Let's stay calm and focused," he said, lowering his voice. "We're here to promote dialogue, not conflict." But as Chad continued to stoke the flames of division, tensions escalated. A few individuals from Chad's group began to approach the booth, their expressions angry and confrontational. "What do you want?" one man sneered, stepping forward. "You think you can just come here and act like everything's fine?" Damon took a deep breath, reminding himself of his commitment to open communication. "We're here to listen to your concerns. We want to work together to improve our community." "Work together?" the man scoffed. "You mean work together to keep us in line? You're just another cog in the machine." The crowd began to close in, and Damon could feel the hostility rising. He knew that words alone wouldn't calm the situation. "Let's take a step back," he said firmly, trying to regain control. "We're not here to fight. We're here to find solutions." Just then, a shout pierced the air. "You don't belong here." Chad's voice boomed, his expression one of fury as he pointed toward Damon. "They don't care about us. This is our city, and we will not be silenced." Damon's heart raced as the crowd erupted into chaos, people shouting and pushing against one another. He felt Lena's hand on his shoulder, a reassuring presence amidst the turmoil. "We need to get out of here," she urged. "It's not safe anymore." "No," Damon replied, determination surging within him. "We're not backing down. We can't let fear dictate our actions." As the crowd grew more unruly, Damon raised his voice, hoping to be heard above the din. "We're here to engage with you. This is a space for dialogue, not violence." But the anger was palpable, and the mob mentality took hold. Some of Chad's supporters began to chant, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and defiance. Damon felt the crowd shift, people pushing against the booth, their faces contorted with rage. "Back off," one of his officers shouted, stepping forward to create a barrier. But the situation was quickly escalating beyond control. In that moment, Damon made a decision. "Lena, we need to move now," he shouted, directing his team to help dismantle the booth. They worked quickly, trying to avoid confrontation while ensuring everyone's safety. As they retreated, Damon could feel the anger and frustration from the crowd behind them. He glanced back at Chad, who was reveling in the chaos, his supporters cheering him on. "Don't let them win, Damon," Lena urged as they made their way to safety. "We'll regroup and figure out our next steps." Damon nodded, frustration boiling beneath the surface. He had come to this rally hoping to foster dialogue, but it had quickly devolved into chaos. As they drove away from the park, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had lost a crucial battle that day. But the war for understanding and respect was far from over. Later that evening, as he sat at home processing the day's events, he received a message from Lena. "We can't let Chad define the narrative. We'll regroup and come back stronger. Let's plan another community event. But this time, we'll be prepared." Damon stared at the message, feeling a flicker of hope amidst resilience and resolution. The days following the chaotic rally weighed heavily on Damon Russell. The event had exposed deep fissures within the community, and despite his commitment to fostering dialogue, he felt as if they had taken several steps backward. As he sat in his living room one evening, the remnants of takeout scattered on the coffee table, he reflected on the turmoil and the challenges ahead. Chad Walters had capitalized on the unrest, using social media to amplify his message and gain traction among those who felt disenfranchised. Videos of the rally had circulated widely, with headlines that painted Damon as the antagonist, stirring the pot instead of seeking solutions. The feeling of being misrepresented was frustrating, but Damon knew he had to channel that frustration into productive action. Determined to regain control of the narrative, Damon gathered his team for a strategy meeting at the precinct. Lena arrived first, her expression a mix of resolve and fatigue. "We can't let this define us," she said as they settled around the table. "We need to come up with a plan that shows the community we're serious about making changes." "I agree," Damon replied, leaning forward, his hands clasped. "We need to focus on community engagement, not just through events, but also through real partnerships. We should involve community leaders, organizations, and even those who opposed us. It's time to show we're here to listen, not dictate." The other officers nodded, their expressions reflecting a renewed sense of purpose. "What if we held a series of workshops?" One officer suggested. "We can create a safe space for residents to express their concerns, and we can educate them on police protocols and community resources." "I love that idea," Lena added. "We can tackle the topics that matter most to them: transparency in policing, understanding police procedures, and fostering trust." Damon felt a surge of optimism. "Let's start reaching out to local organizations to collaborate on these workshops. We can promote them through social media, flyers, and community boards. We need to ensure that everyone feels welcome to attend." As the team finalized the details, Damon felt a growing sense of hope. The upcoming workshops could be a game changer, an opportunity to reestablish trust within the community. But deep down, he knew it would take more than just a few meetings to heal the wounds that had been inflicted. Over the next few weeks, Damon and his team worked tirelessly to organize the workshops. They reached out to various community leaders, local organizations, and even individuals who had voiced their criticisms, inviting them to participate in the planning process. Their goal was to create a collaborative effort that represented a diverse array of voices. The day of the first workshop finally arrived, and Damon stood at the entrance of the community center, greeting attendees as they arrived. The atmosphere was buzzing with energy, and as people filtered in, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was a chance to make a significant impact, but he was acutely aware of the skepticism that lingered among some attendees. Lena joined him, holding a clipboard filled with notes and an agenda. "Looks like we have a good turnout," she said, glancing at the growing crowd. "Let's hope they're ready to engage." As the workshop began, Damon welcomed everyone, expressing gratitude for their willingness to participate. He laid out the purpose of the event, emphasizing that it was a platform for open dialogue and learning. "This is our opportunity to bridge the gaps between law enforcement and the community," he said, his voice steady. "We're here to listen to your concerns, share information, and work toward understanding." The first session focused on police procedures, led by an experienced officer who walked attendees through the protocols surrounding traffic stops and interactions with law enforcement. The room was filled with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, but as the officer explained each step, people began to ask questions, eager for clarification. "Why do you need to see our ID immediately?" One woman challenged, her arms crossed defensively. "What if we don't have it on us?" The officer paused, recognizing the importance of the question. "That's a valid concern. It's important for us to identify individuals in situations where we believe there may be a safety concern. But we understand that not everyone will have their ID readily available, and were trained to handle those situations with care. As the workshop continued, Damon watched the crowd's engagement shift. Participants began to share their experiences, expressing both frustration and understanding. There was a palpable sense of relief in the air, as if a weight had been lifted. One attendee stood up, her voice trembling slightly. "I've always felt scared when I see a police officer. I didn't realize that you were just as concerned about our safety as we are. It's hard to see that when the media only shows the bad things." Damon nodded, his heart swelling with empathy. "I understand how you feel. The media often focuses on the most sensational stories, and it can create a divide. But we're committed to breaking that cycle and building a more positive relationship with our community." As the workshops progressed, the atmosphere became increasingly collaborative. Ideas flowed freely, and by the end of the session, people were exchanging contact information and discussing potential partnerships to address local concerns. Damon felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that they were making real strides toward healing the community. However, the following week brought fresh challenges. During a routine patrol, Damon and Lena received a call about a disturbance in a nearby neighborhood. As they arrived on the scene, they were met with a crowd gathered around a young man who appeared to be in distress. Damon recognized him as a local youth leader, someone he had met during community events. "What happened?" Damon asked as he approached the group, his instincts kicking in. "They're saying he was stealing," a woman shouted, her voice filled with anger. "But he was just trying to help a friend who was in trouble." Damon's heart raced as he assessed the situation. He could see the tension in the crowd, fear and anger boiling over as they faced the presence of law enforcement. "Let's take a step back," he said calmly, raising his hands to signal for the crowd to disperse. "We're here to understand what's going on. Can someone tell me what happened?" As the crowd began to quiet down, the young man spoke up, his voice shaking. "I was trying to help my friend who was being bullied. I didn't steal anything. I just wanted to break it up." Damon listened intently, his mind racing as he processed the situation. "Let's get the facts. We're not here to escalate anything. We want to make sure everyone is safe." Lena nodded, stepping in to support Damon. "Can we get your friend over here? Let's talk about what happened and find a resolution." As they began to gather information, Damon realized how fragile the situation was. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him, waiting to see how he would respond. This was a chance to demonstrate the lessons learned from the workshops, to show that they were committed to being part of the solution, not part of the problem. With patience, Damon facilitated the conversation, ensuring everyone had a chance to express their concerns. After several tense moments, it became clear that the incident had escalated unnecessarily, fueled by misunderstandings and fear. "We're going to resolve this peacefully," Damon stated, his voice firm but compassionate. "If there are no charges, then there's no need for conflict. Let's work together to find a better way to handle these situations in the future." The crowd began to disperse, the tension easing as people recognized that Damon and Lena were there to help, not hinder. The young man expressed gratitude, relieved that the situation hadn't escalated further. As they left the scene, Damon felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The day's events had been a reminder of the delicate balance they were trying to maintain in the community. Each incident, whether small or large, was an opportunity to either build or destroy trust. That evening, as he sat in his living room once more, he reflected on how far they had come. The workshops had opened doors, but the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. He knew that the journey toward healing and understanding would be ongoing, a path that required constant vigilance and commitment. His phone buzzed with a new message from Lena. "Great job today. It's moments like these that remind us why we're doing this. Let's keep pushing forward." Damon smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Together, they could continue to build on the progress they had made. With each workshop, each conversation, and each small victory, they were laying the groundwork for a stronger, more unified community. As he drifted off to sleep that night, He envisioned a future where respect and understanding were the foundation of their society, a future where conversations were no longer overshadowed by anger and fear, but instead illuminated by hope and unity.